On this holy night, not all is calm, not all is bright in Ukraine. The intense fighting continues.
The Ukrainians who are holding the line on the Eastern Front where I was have had to endure great hardship.
Russian President Vladimir Putin saying Russia is ready for talks to end the war in Ukraine.
Hi, I'm Mark Fisher.
Hi, I'm Mike Banker, and you're entering a world gone good.
Well, hello, my name is Steve, and here we are again, shining the light into the darkness to prove we still live in a world gone good. If you're picking up what we've been putting down here, then by all means, please, yes, share us with your friends. Subscribe to us wherever you are listening now, and best of all, leave us a rating and a short review. Who will be the first good person to review us in 2023? Will it be you? Will you be the good reviewing first person of 2023? Every share, subscription, rating, and review helps spread the good. And for that, we say, as always, thank you. So did you hear what went down last episode? Which part, you ask? Well, the part where we had our first ever commercial, and it wasn't even an actual commercial. It was me just plugging my new play, Happy Birthday McKenna, opening March 3rd at the Hudson Backstage in Los Angeles. How about the part where I said you can get all the info and all the tickets as well at hbmtheplay.com? What about when I repeated that HBM stands for Happy Birthday McKenna, and then I said it again like this? I went HBM, Happy Birthday McKenna, hbmtheplay.com. Remember when I said all that in our last episode? Well, if you do, well, thank you very much for letting me go over it again for the others who were not paying attention. And if you don't remember that at all, well, you need to go back and listen to that part, at least of the episode, if not the whole thing, or just go to hbmtheplay.com and see it's all there. Simple. Thank God we didn't have to sit through another commercial about it, right? Okay, now we shift to a little more serious of a tone here. 1 year ago, this February 24th, the lives of everyone in Ukraine changed. And while I'd like to have ended that last sentence with a for the better, we all know by now I simply cannot. It's been a dark time for Ukraine and Ukrainians, but as we know from this show of ours, there's always light. You may have to look for it, you may have to shine it yourself, but it's there and it leads to the good. Speaking of shining the light, that's what we're doing today. Mark Fisher and Mike Banker are two of the good forces behind HUMANǀUNITY, a global mobilization in support of Ukraine and for Ukraine. They are right now filming HUMANǀUNITY, a documentary exploring the inspiring and impactful stories of ordinary people from all over the world and all walks of life doing extraordinary things to support Ukraine in their David versus Goliath stand against Russia. Now, I get this question a lot. Where do you find these guests? Well, I luck out a lot I have a lot of good friends making, here we go again, a lot of good things happen. And what happened here is my good friend Tisha messaged me and she said, I have the perfect people for your podcast. My brother-in-law is working on a documentary about Ukraine. So I want to say thank you to Tisha for setting this good one in motion.
The inception of the project came about. I have a good friend. His name is Patrick Sweeney. We were hanging out in Chamonix this past winter. And then we were actually both in LA at a film festival where I had a film showing at it and he had sort of organized the festival. And just before then, I had, participated with a bunch of National Geographic photographers. We had a Vital Impacts print sale. We had raised $800,000. And I think like so many people, when this latest wave of war broke out in Ukraine on February 24th, we're there scratching our heads being like, well, this is not just a travesty, but what can we do? What else? And it was awesome to be part of this print sale that raised a bunch of money for the relief effort. But my friend Patrick and I were talking about, what else is there? How can we be involved? And we had been talking in LA, and then I went from LA basically straight to Alaska. And then there he reached out. He's like, hey, I've got, he's connected through YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And so he's connected with a bunch of CEOs and started talking with CEOs that had literally just dropped everything to do something. And the difference being, instead of just writing a check and mailing a check to the Red Cross or UNICEF or whoever, they were actually driving to the border. They were delivering supplies. They were doing these really remarkable things that really stood out. And so basically Patrick was like, hey, do you want to produce this with me? And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And that's where the co-director and co-producer came in with Patrick and myself.
There are so many situations like this around the world. What was it about Ukraine that sparked something in you to get involved?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a question we've been asking everyone we talk to about what the motivation, like why was this different? And the answers are all pretty simple. It's, like we've talked to people in Poland and France and the Czech Republic. And it's like when it's on your doorstep, you can't just sit there when your neighbor, when someone robs your neighbor's house, you can't just sit there and do nothing. And I think the magnitude and the unjustness of the invasion and the consequences and severity for if the invasion went horribly wrong. In other words, if Russia were to be successful in overtaking Ukraine, the consequences for the world are pretty dire. And so I think the world recognized the magnitude of the situation, and the world recognized the unjustness of the situation, and people were just compelled to act.
Mike, how were you brought into this project?
So I'm on the board of an outdoor survival school, and I was on a retreat on the campus, and one of the instructors showed up, and she'd just gotten back from Ukraine that day before and had gone over there with her sister. Her babushka was Ukrainian, and they went and provided volunteer medical training for about 6 weeks. And she walked in and saw her, and she had this glazed look in her eyes. And then 2 days later, I get a random phone call from Mark. And Mark and I have known each other since first week of freshman year in college, and have worked on a couple of other things together. And said, "Hey, I'm going to do this film on Ukraine. Do you want to come work on it with me?" And I was thought about it and the movement, and the topic, and everything, and said, "Yeah, let's do it. I'm in."
Now, let's also clarify, because you also have a brother named Mark.
Yes, I do.
And he has a wife named Tisha.
Indeed.
And just so everyone knows this, and Mike, you and I have never met, but just so you know this, Tisha and I are literally the same person, except different body parts, and I have a shaved head. We're literally the same person. So if you love Tisha, you would love me. If you can't stand Tisha, you and I are not going to get along.
Tisha's fantastic.
That's what I wanted to hear. Now, so obviously, look, you have the ability to tell a story. And we talk about this on here all the time, is does everyone have a story? That's a question that comes up on this show a lot. Do you believe that everyone has a story? So here you are going into the middle of a war zone. How do you start going in there and finding the people who want to tell their story?
It's a really good question. I mean, we literally, like I said, we got the broad level, how this thing started. Patrick had interviewed a couple people over Zoom. Another woman, Alla, who's involved in the project, she had interviewed a couple people. So basically we had some like YPO connections scattered throughout Europe, starting Geneva, Prague, Warsaw. And honestly, we just had threads of people, mostly CEOs that were doing stuff. And so we just were like, well, let's just go connect with these people and start talking with them. And, the whole project, like so many docs, are passion projects, self-funded, shoestring operations. But we all knew that there was something deeper, not just with Ukraine, but we all felt the importance and urgency to tell these stories. And so we just showed up in Geneva, went to Chamonix, where Patrick is based, and honestly connected with one of the more compelling stories that we found in terms of World Gone Good. I mean, think about World Gone Good. Like, we ended up connecting with this amazing refugee story in Chamonix of hockey players that came from Eastern Ukraine, were picked up by Chamonix hockey coaches, driven to Chamonix in March.
Youth hockey players.
Yeah, youth hockey players. And literally just assimilated into French society in Chamonix, which is different than what most people know French society is. It's an amazing place. And they join this youth hockey team, go on to win the French National Youth Hockey League Championship that year.
At the end of the season, we have a team on the 17th qualify for the final of the French Championships. They are not refugees on ice. They're part of a team. So there's no refugee in our sports. There's only players.
And it was just this super touching story where, it's like, yeah, people just wanted to help, and they just literally drove to the border, picked up 50 Ukrainians, mostly mothers and their children, and then fostered them and supported them and helping them assimilate into French life. And so we started there. Patrick had actually bought this old beat up climbing van, literally this 20-year-old rusted out Ford Transit that was, just a dirtbag climbing van with a bed in the back. And we drove this thing overnight from Chamonix to Prague, ended up in Prague after filming with this Ukrainian business leader. And at the time, we didn't have any true intention to go into Ukraine on that trip. None of us really knew what it was really like in terms of on the ground. It's a war zone. What you hear from the outside, it's still pretty early in the invasion. And literally, we just finished filming. We're at a coffee shop in Prague, meet these two women at a coffee shop, and lo and behold, they're Ukrainian. And it was like, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. How are you doing? And how's it? And they're like, we're fine. And I'm like, well, and they're like, we're not leaving. And it was this stark realization that they're like, we're not leaving. Like, no, this is our country, and we're staying, and we're here. We're Ukrainian. And we're like, well, what's it like? And they're like, it's fine. They're like, you should go. And so, almost on spur of the moment,
Changed our plans, and just drove into Ukraine with zero plan, other than knowing these two, having the contact information for these two Ukrainian women that lived in Lviv. That was it. And we just went into country and started piecing it together on the ground.
When we went over to Europe, like we had some broad strokes and a few interviews lined up, but we kind of felt like, well, things will come together once we get on the ground. And in fact, they did. Especially in Ukraine. Once we were in Ukraine, we got hooked up with the Ukrainian journalists, and she started making calls for us, and she found us a refugee camp from...
But they were from Mariupol.
Mariupol, yeah. And so, the whole film has been a lot of weird moments where things just have come together.
What is the culture like? I mean, what is that like to meet somebody in one country who's from another country who tells you, yeah, just go on in, when it's the middle of a war going on?
It was pretty inspiring. It was pretty moving. And one of these women actually showed me a photo of her with a gun on her lap. And this is like, she's like 25. She works as a hairstylist, and there she is at her apartment in Lviv. And she's like, I'm not leaving. I got a gun. and it was really like, this is something else is happening here.
You were making a documentary. What is the goal of the documentary?
The goal is to inspire people about the power of what can happen when humans unite around a common cause. And that's truly the message, one of the most powerful messages of what we've been experiencing, and what we hope this film will do for citizens of the world, for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the war started, all of us independently were noticing just how much more attention it was getting, and how much it just, you heard all these stories of people rallying to help, and I think the film ultimately kind of became our way of contributing to that, and we wanted to make it about the volunteers. I mean, I think there are several other Ukraine documentaries being made, but I haven't heard of any others that are focused specifically on the volunteers, and it's people from all over the world, but also there's a ton of people in Ukraine that are Ukrainians that are volunteering, and it's just this massive mobilization of people all working together and making amazing things happen.
One of the taglines is "Ordinary people doing extraordinary things." I just heard a story 2 days ago where, right now in Kyiv, there's a woman that lives on the 26th floor of a building. It's a walk up with a broken leg, where, I think it probably has an elevator, but with the power outages and whatever. And so all the neighbors, all the residents of this 30-story apartment complex set up rest areas inside their apartment for this woman with a broken leg, so that every 2 floors she can take a break inside someone's apartment as she's walking up and down the stairs with a broken leg. And it's just story after story like this, where people are just, that there's no division in the country. There's just connection and cohesion. And it's really powerful. It's really inspiring.
Yeah. And I think all of us everybody on our crew going into Ukraine has been a life-changing experience. Like we didn't know what to expect. And after Ukraine wins, everyone should go to Ukraine. Lviv is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. Holds its own, but like we'd be in the streets with our cameras, and Ukrainians would just come up to us and ask us who we were in front of Americans. It's just be so grateful that we were even there, and that thankful that the world was helping them, and that it was just very inspiring to experience that.
Well, and thankful that we were capturing their stories. Mm-hmm. and helping share real stories, because the misinformation and the propaganda is obviously a big part of the backdrop, at least from the Russia side,
So we went through something with COVID, right? And this is a country that perhaps some people think we handled COVID right. I think, quite personally, I'll be the one to say it, over 1 million people dying is not exactly handling it right. But you talked about something, which is division and divisiveness. How did your perspective change as Americans? Did it change going in and seeing people having to get back to the basics and come together?
It's something that I've never experienced. I don't think it matters that I'm an American. I live my life traveling the world for work, and I've never experienced a human spirit and connection like I did amongst the people of Ukraine. Yeah, it's humbling, but also inspiring that it can work differently than what we experience currently here in the US, for instance.
When you start a documentary, sometimes there's a story, right? You have a life story, right? So we know how it's a court case, so I know how it's going to end, or perhaps the court decision hasn't been made. But you get what I'm saying. There's an A and the B. There's a first act, second act, third act. We know where we're going. When you went into this, did you have a plan? Did the plan change? What was the story? And then what did the story become?
That's a lot of questions there. No,
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I do it all the time. I ask way too many fucking questions. Go ahead.
No, I think honestly, and I don't think I'm alone in this thought. When Russia first invaded on February 24th, I sat there thinking that there's no way in hell that Ukraine is going to withstand a country like Russia or have a chance of winning. And even on this first trip, going into the first trip, I was still like, there is no way. How could Ukraine actually have a chance at winning this war? And by the end of that first trip, I was completely of the opposite opinion, that I'm like, wow, like they actually are going to win this. And then there's a second thing that's happened that really changed. And so the answer to your first question is no. Going into it, I didn't have a clear vision of how the story was going to end, but now I do. And the difference is, so we came back on our first trip and put together a trailer, started trying to get the word out. And in the process, I got connected with Nicole Wallace from MSNBC. And Nicole is a total badass. And she connected me with this guy named Igor in Kyiv. And Igor was President Zelensky's advisor and responsible for Ukraine-U.S. relations under the Trump administration. He's a total baller.
He was the point person for the Trump-Ukraine scandal.
Yeah, fantastic.
So all of a sudden, I'm talking with Igor, and Igor helped line us up for our second trip, which was in September. Lined us up with amazing people like Vitaly Klitschko and all these heavy hitters. And Igor, I spent a lot of time with Igor at this point, and he's an amazing human and super bright. And his whole shtick, and he's actually writing a book on Ukraine and holacracy. And holacracy is basically the theory and of when people independently rally around a problem to come to a solution, that they're way more successful. In other words, it's different than a top-down management approach where you're told to do something, you have a team, and it's this very hierarchical structure. His mindset, and I believe him, is that Ukraine is truly a holocratic society, meaning that independently, millions of Ukrainians are just mobilizing within their own groups of their own volition, and that they are truly solving problems in creative, out-of-the-box ways that no other country would do other than Ukraine. And we're seeing it on the ground. We're seeing it with 3D.
But can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Wait, I have to ask a question on that. So was that something that was already happening, or was it how did that come about? Is that a part of their culture? Is that a part of their community? Or did that come about when they were put in this situation?
Both. So that Ukraine has always been, in his opinion, and like I said, I agree, a holocratic society, that people have always self-mobilized, self-organized, been independent, been free-thinking. Ukraine is home to chip manufacturing and amazing computer scientists and programmers, and they're very bright. And they're very progressive. I mean, they're the only country in the world, or the first country in the world, to have a fully digital system on their phone that has passport, ID, all this stuff. So they're they're thought leaders, they're creative, they're very technologically savvy. But yes, the war in Ukraine has amplified this effectiveness and this holocratic society where they are just organized. I mean, they crowdsourced funded for Bayraktar drones, and the Serhiy Prytula Foundation raised $15 million in 3 days.
And they were looking for 5, I think. And the country rallied together and blew them out of it. They were like, hey, let's set a really audacious goal, and let's try to raise $5 million in a week. And Ukrainians contributed enough to give them $12 million in 3 days. They stopped the campaign and were like, wow, we are blown away. But on their culture, I'm definitely not a Ukraine historical expert, but I'm learning more. And Ukraine's really kind of been at the crossroads of a lot of war and battles and empires, and that's shaped them. I mean, it's a little bit of a melting pot in some ways, but it's also they've become very what's the word I'm looking for? They're gritty. They know how to get things done themselves. They don't want to rely on others because they've often had to do that either as a rebellion against some other empire or just to get by, to stay underneath the radar. And I think that's my sense from talking to Ukrainians, partly at least how it came about.
The story ends with Ukraine winning, Ukraine receiving reparations for all the damage. Lots of people talk about a new Marshall Plan. And I think Ukraine is truly poised to be not just a leader for Western Europe, but for honestly the whole world. I think that's how cutting edge they are, and I think the hope, and I think that's part of this film, is that within great darkness comes brightness, comes hope. And sometimes you have to be pushed to the very limit to see the beauty emerge, and the possibilities that are going to come from Ukraine in terms of being a global energy leader, between a technology leader. When the rebuilding happens and Ukraine is enabled and respected as a true sovereign independent nation, I think they're going to be a leader. So I think that's the fairy tale ending.
I mean, yeah, they're gonna have to rebuild so much, and no one asked to have the slate clean, but it is now. And there are cities that are pretty much wiped off the map, and you can rebuild them the way we have technology today. So, for like climate change, for example, you could rebuild a city with green buildings and green electricity and green mobility, and make it the city of the future, because you have the ability to start from scratch. So that's sort of the silver lining of having your country obliterated, unfortunately. But I think there can be a very positive fairy tale ending, that Ukraine becomes a beacon for the world and shows what you can do with all the new technologies and AI and everything else.
So, Mike, let me ask you this. You're the writer of the project, or one of the writers of the project, correct?
Yes.
So as a writer of a documentary, how does that work? I think that's a question a lot of people have. If it's a documentary, I mean, I'm a writer myself. I think I have the answer, but you tell everybody. How does that work when you're in the writing process of creating the story for this?
I think it's happening on two ends. While you're in production, you're thinking about what is the story here, and writing the questions that need to be asked to pursue that story. And then, somebody says something that leads you down another track, and you start to see all these threads coming together. And we have a ton of threads. And now what's going to be most interesting is we have enough stuff to make a whole series, but stuff's going to have to be left on the cutting room floor. And so then once taking all of that mass content and narrowing it down to what the key stories that are going to put forward the message and the information and inspiration that you're looking for. And that's kind of where the second stage of writing comes in.
I think with a documentary like this too, it's a mixture of crafting the story from a written perspective, while at the same time allowing the story to fuel the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like, it's a balance. Like, we're not creating a story that doesn't exist. We're weaving the story together in a way that delivers the message we're trying to tell, the story we're trying to tell.
And that's sometimes the best writing, because when I'm writing, and a lot of writers write, you let the characters tell you the story. And sometimes you've plotted it out, but the characters start flowing right through you and they take you in another direction. You have to go with it. So on that note, how will you know when you're done, when you have what you need? Is there going to be, when do you know that this is it? We got it. We have what we need.
It's funny they should ask that, because we thought we were there at the end of October, and then some other things have emerged in the last month, and so Patrick's actually going back into Ukraine this week, and we're going to be sending another crew back in early January to pursue some other stories that kind of came along that we want to build into it. So we're getting close. But yeah, it's always tricky because something comes along and you like, wow, that's really great. Do we want to use that too? We had to struggle with that a little bit on this latest development, but we decided, it's worth it to get this in the film.
Well, and it's a good question, because it's never truly done.
Yeah.
Like, this story will keep telling itself, and I think honestly that's one of the outcomes of working on this film, is that this film will finish at some point. We'll release it. Part of that is because the sooner we get the story out, the better. But part of it is that there's other stories to tell, and this won't be the last story we tell about Ukraine or some epic story or unique people or truly groundbreaking movement that's happening there. So this is what, whether it's a series or a feature doc, or the only truth is that this is sort of just the beginning of how we're being moved in our involvement with Ukraine and Ukrainians.
My audience needs to know there was a Kickstarter that went with this. What is happening now for an audience like mine to help you keep going? Talk about the Kickstarter and then tell us now how they can keep going and helping you get this done.
Thanks for asking that question, Steve. It's a million. It's even though there's a shoestring budget, it's still expensive. And so, yeah, we launched it. We had a successful Kickstarter campaign. We still need a lot of money.
The Kickstarter wasn't to raise all the money. It was to kind of fund this phase of production. And just we needed some seed money to keep it going while we pursue other sources, which we are continuing to do right now.
So there's two main ways. I mean, go to our website. There is a HumanUnityFilm.com webpage. Right on that webpage, you can click the donate button. That goes right to us and directly benefits continued production in the field, post-production, all elements. You can also reach out. We're looking for executive producers to get behind this film. And there's all kinds of opportunities to help really amplify both funding and the reach. And then the plan is that we'll be premiering it in Kyiv in early June. Yeah,
and if anybody's listening that wants to buy this for a streaming service, that would be really helpful too.
We should get our list out of all the things we need people to buy, but keep going. Yes.
But what's something that is unique about this is, we're not trying to make a profit on this. We are just trying to cover our production costs. And then the plan is everything above that will be donated back to the various organizations that we've been working with and interviewing to help them and help them continue to do the great work they've been doing, which is why we told their story in the first place.
So we close our shows with two questions, gentlemen. We're going to start with you, Mark, which means, Mike, you get to hear the question. You get to think about it. So, Mark, going back to anything we've already talked about or anything you want to say, the question is this: who inspires you?
What I'm inspired most by is the collective response of humans towards the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, and inspired by their actions and continued actions in the face of great suffering and loss to continue moving forward.
Mike, who inspires you?
Yeah, I'd echo that somewhat and kind of add to it or get a little more specific, like people going above and beyond when they don't need to. I mean, and we live in such a technology world right now. We're all staring at screens all the time. And, what's been so inspiring about making this film is all these people, random people that were from every profession, from CEO down to bus drivers, going and doing whatever they can. And it goes beyond that. Like, we were at a warehouse in Poland where people from all over the world they can't come and volunteer, but they're just packing up boxes and sending those materials to donate. And so it's just like people going out of their way when they don't have to. And you add all that up and it just makes such a bigger, more powerful whole and impact. And
take action. That's the thing. Is like we talk about this on the show. Yeah.
Our whole goal with this film is we want to inspire. I mean, Ukraine. This isn't going to end tomorrow. Ukraine still needs help, and they're not getting as much attention anymore. And so we really want to inspire more people to continue helping Ukraine, just like they have been so far, to keep the momentum going and help them win and become this great place that everyone can go visit.
And the final question we end every show with, again, goes back to anything you want to say we've already talked about or anything you want to say. It's actually not a question. Statement to finish. Starting with you, Mike. Tell me something good.
So we had another crew that went in. So we went in, we were back. Our second trip in Ukraine was the end of September, and we were there for 2 weeks and came back. And we sent another crew in who went a little closer to the front lines. We lined them up with the Ukrainian film crew. It was two American women that had been over previously doing medical volunteering. and they ended up going to visit an animal shelter outside of Kyiv, and there was a bunch of lions there that had been rescued. So it's wildlife and pets, and there was an injured lion that the photo got taken, and somehow the photo of this lion went viral around the world, and that then connected with some veterinarian in the U.S. that helped get these 16 lions evacuated out of Ukraine to go live in a sanctuary. And it's just kind of the power of collective and information flow and everything. One day this organization was barely getting by to feed, have the money to feed these lions. The next day, the lions are getting a brand new life somewhere else outside of where they'd been in the East, I think, in the war areas. So that was really cool and really good.
Mark, you're going to close the show and tell me something good.
One of the best stories I heard about all the different efforts that people were undergoing to fight against this invasion was about this group of underground computer hackers, not maliciously stealing money or anything like that. They were literally executing smear campaigns against multinational corporations still operating inside Russia as a way to pressure them to stop supporting the regime. And so I just thought it was a really cool, creative, out-of-the-box way to do something good in a out-of-the-box solution.
I thought of another one. This is a way that anyone can get involved in this. On social media, on Twitter is where it started. There's a movement called NAFO, National North Atlantic Fellas Organization, and it's to fight against Russian disinformation. And I think there are over 100,000 people now that have joined. At one time, Representative Kinzinger had his personal Twitter profile was this NAFO. It's a weird dog, but basically they make joke memes to fight off Russian information. And I've just been fascinated by the movement, and it's become like a model of how you can fight disinformation and do it from the ground up.
Thank you, Mark and Mike, for sharing your good. Go now, right now, to the Human Unity website. Get more info and give them some support. Next time on World Gone Good.
When you go through a big change, there's this whole process of giving birth to yourself and to the life that you want and the relationships that you want, and just like giving birth to that. And there's a lot of like labor pain around that. And then there's a lot of healing and recovery on the other side of that birth.
One of my favorite humans and heroes brings her good to an all-new episode. Kavitha Rajagopalan married the kid I grew up next door to, literally, right next door, my friend Matt. That's who she married. They had 2 beautiful children, and then received the news no parent ever wants to hear one of their children was sick, and the chances of him beating the odds were next to impossible. But here's the good news. He did. He beat the odds. Kavi shares her family's 1 in a million good story, and what a story it is. I can't wait for you to hear it. Until then, be good.